Welcome to the Pulpit Porch. I'm Tony Marr, and with me as always is my friend Robert Kell.
Hey everybody, we are so glad you're here. The Pulpit and Porch is where we kick back, put up our feet, and have real conversations about life, faith, growth, and maybe even a little sports and pop culture.
If you're looking for a perfectly polished sermon, you're probably in the wrong place.
Yeah, around here, it's more about those honest, heart-to-heart conversations, like the one you'd have on a front porch with good friends. Sometimes we stay on track, sometimes we take the scenic route.
And honestly, that's half the fun, isn't it? We dig into the highs, the lows, and all the in-betweens of living out your faith in real life. Along the way, we may pull up a few extra chairs and invite some friends onto the porch to share stories and ideas that just may change the way that you see things.
So whether you're chasing your purpose, building your faith, or just trying to live a little more fully, pull up a chair, grab some sweet tea, and join us. This is the Pulpit and Porch. We got a seat waiting for you.
All right, well, welcome back into the Pulpit and Porch. I am Tony Marr, along with my good friend Robert Kell. We are here and giving this a shot. We are experiencing some technical difficulties this morning, but I think that hopefully we have them figured out.
It's always a hope. It's the hope that kills you, as Ted Lasso says.
We are not alone on the porch this morning. We're welcoming back an old friend to the show, but this is his first time on the show as the Pulpit and Porch show. And so technically, this is his first visit to the Pulpit and Porch.
It's not just us and the dogs today.
No, it's not. So, Stephen, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. How are you all? It's nice to be on the porch here in Tennessee.
Yeah, so we do want to welcome our old and good friend. Not old like in age.
Wait a minute, what?
Old in relationally old friend, critically acclaimed author, speaker, storyteller, and all-around good guy, Mr. Stephen James. Welcome to the porch.
Thanks. That's the nicest bio anyone has ever read about me, with the end part. I love that, the nice guy. I'm going to add that to my website, I think.
I think
all
you
around
should.
this guy.
So, Stephen, you have been all around the world in the last little bit. You've been traveling a lot, speaking a lot, leading workshops all over the place. And now you get to come back home and sit on the porch with these two guys here.
Oh, it's the highlight of my spring. What can I say?
So what have you been into since the last time you were on our show?
Oh, I've been working on on a new book. Obviously, I'm always kind of doing that. And I was in Scotland teaching some missionaries for about a week on fiction writing and how to tell stories in a master class on storytelling. So that was fantastic, tons of fun. And the missionaries came from around the world, and we had a great week together. And so I'm back in town trying to chop forward on my next book and stay on top of the pile that seems to keep continually reproducing. I don't understand. Like, I look at my inbox and I thought I was getting to the bottom of it, and it's whenever I turn my back, I think it reproduces.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. So you just got back from Scotland. My daughter is actually in Scotland right now, and
fun.
I FaceTimed with her just about an hour ago. She is on the Isle of Skye today.
Oh, wow.
Did you make your way there?
I wasn't able to get there, but we were near Glasgow and on the shore. So we also went to this thing called it was like a mission. It's like a mission thing for young adults. So I'm trying to remember the exact name of it, but it was a really cool worship concert event that they had in Glasgow while I was there last month. So I did that too, and that was tons of fun.
So having been in Scotland recently, can you please help me to understand, not only were you in Scotland recently, but you're also a literary genius, a master of word. And so
that's what I would add to my bio if I were you, Steve.
Oh boy. Yeah.
All around good guy pales in comparison to that.
If you could please explain to me why Edinburgh is pronounced Edinburgh, even though it clearly should be Edinburgh.
Well, I think for the same reason Louisville is not Louisville.
That's the explanation that we.
Now
Yeah,
you're
that's the quote I have.
now
Now
you're
I'm
just
just
messing
even
with
more.
it.
I don't know.
Even more
Dialect.
confused.
No, like I don't really know exactly why certain like New Orleans. If you go there, they're like, no, it's Norlands, and if you go to Milwaukee, it's Milwaukee, and I guess everyone has their own way of saying the place where they live.
Yeah, I guess so. But there's a right way, and then there's a wrong way.
Oh, really? And this
Yeah.
is coming from someone who lives in the Appalachian Mountains, not the Appalachian Mountains. Am I
Very
right?
true, and is from Nevada, not Nevada.
Oh, wow. Oh, no.
He's wrong, isn't he, Stephen? It's Nevada, right?
I mean-
well, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Pulpit
Yeah.
Porch. Hey, so Stephen, you recently just came out with a new book that is a new book that's also an old book. It's a book that you wrote 15 years ago, but you re-released it. You rewrote part of it. And it's a book that as I've been flipping through the last couple of weeks, have really been hit hard with some of the things that you wrote. Why don't you take just a minute and explain to us your new book, A Heart Exposed, why you decided to revisit this book after 15 years and re-release it now?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. You know, over the years, I would write prayers. So off and on, I would just write a prayer that I would use, and then I would edit it and change it, and eventually saved a bunch of them. And then, like you said, 15 years ago, we came out with this book, A Heart Exposed, and eventually it went out of print, which means people couldn't get it anymore. It wasn't available. And then I met up with a good friend of mine named Joseph, who's a publisher, and he said, I think we could get this book back out to a new generation of people, a new group of people. And so I went through it from start to finish and added a ton of new stuff, changed and altered and edited a lot of the prayers in there. And so in all truth, I mean, this is about 25 years of my life, because it took me many years to first write the book and then to come back to it again after 15 years. So of all the books I've written, I would say it's probably taken me the longest to really shape and hone and pull together. So it's kind of unusual in that way, but the prayers are more poetic, I would say, than maybe your typical prayers, but really trying to be incisive, trying to go deep and be raw and real and just connect with God in a different level.
So you're pretty well known for your serial killer novels. How do you go from writing slasher books, serial killer spy thrillers, to writing a book of prayers?
Oh, it's interesting. Over the years, I've done 21 novels now, and most of them are, suspense, psychological thrillers, and so on. And one of the things I really like about writing crime drama, crime thrillers, and so on, are just the chance to explore good and evil, light and darkness, justice, vengeance, deep questions, big questions. And so I let my characters ask big questions in the books. And then in my prayer book, I end up asking them myself. So it isn't as different as it might seem at first, because I think all of my books tend to wrestle with, I guess, what I would say is big questions, either through my words or through the characters' words in my novels.
Where did this come from? Take us back 25 years ago when you first started writing these prayers. What season of life were you in when you wrote this? Was this something that you intended to package this as a book when you started out, or was this of your personal prayer life?
I've always loved, first of all, I've always loved poetry, but I've also always loved books of prayers. But sometimes it just felt to me like they were either too polished or, I don't know, maybe too surface. And so I started to really just try to be super honest in the prayers I was writing and working on at the time. And interestingly enough, I was actually writing one of my books called The Night, KNIGHT, like a chess piece, when I wrote A Heart Exposed, the first version of it 15 years ago. So it's a book that it actually is very dark. And it is about a serial killer, come to think of it. But I was writing it and I was like, I need a break. So I moved from that to writing the book of prayers, and then came back to finish the night after about a month or two of collecting and editing and revising some of these prayers. So it was fascinating that after sort of having all these notebooks with these ideas in, I was able to go through them, pull them together, and then get back to see how my hero vanquished the bad guys and saved the day.
Did you see any themes as you were putting this together that seemed to run through all of the prayers? Maybe not one, but a few different themes?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I don't have maybe an index or something at the end, like, so with prayers of adoration.
If you're struggling with this, go to this page. If you're struggling with this, go to this page. Yeah.
I didn't do that kind of on purpose because, I don't feel like the prayers that I personally do, share with the Lord and so on, I really don't have categories so much for those. And so I just wanted to write some prayers that would open people up to thinking about God and the relationship in a slightly different way. You're a friend of mine. We've known each other for many years. And, when we get together, we may hang out, we may chat about things. We may ask each other tough questions and so on. But I found that a lot of the prayers that I was praying would either be like thanking God, complaining to God, or asking God for something. And I was like, that doesn't seem like a very deep relationship. Like if I got together with you and all I did was thank you for things, complain to you about things, and ask you for things, it would get old after a little while.
It's about like my relationship with Robert.
It is. That's all I do. I just thank Tony a lot.
Complain all the time.
Complain.
So yeah, I was like, I want my relationship to God with God to be deeper than just those three areas that seem to be where I would default to. So I always try to stretch myself and examine things maybe from different perspectives. Another thing that was going on, you asked about kind of what was going on in my life. Like I was reading the book of Psalms, and I think somebody once counted them up, and there are more Psalms that are complaints to God than are Psalms of thanksgiving to God. I just thought that's fascinating.
2/3 of the Psalms is lament. I think it's like 2/3.
Is it really?
Of what, I think it's like something close to 2/3 of what David wrote out of the Psalms is like laments that he had. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, Stephen, I'm the same way. That's a crazy thought to me. That the king, King David was writing this many laments and sappy kind of cry moments.
The thing that I like about that, and even the book of Job, wherever Job asks a lot of really big questions and stuff, is it's like God's not afraid of our pain. Like he's not afraid of our doubts. He's not intimidated by our questions. He doesn't run from us when we come to him with difficulties. And to me, that's encouraging. It's like, I can bring God whatever I have. If it's painful, if it's a doubt, if it's a question, whatever, all those things, he's welcoming to all of those things. And so although it might sound a little strange, I find it encouraging that, the Bible, I think Philip Yancey once said that the Bible is not afraid of, questions, because it includes all of the major arguments against the existence of God and very few for the existence of God. Like if you read the Bible, it never tries to argue that God exists. It just provides the information in a way that anyone who's seeking truth could be like, okay, I accept this. But there's lots of places where it argues like against the existence of God or a good God or God's compassion and so on. In the Psalms is some of those. And again, to me, I'm like, okay, that's pretty interesting. And so just the idea of doubts, the idea of anger, the idea of emotions that are difficult to understand and even express. I feel like God is open to all of those things. He's not ever afraid or intimidated for us to bring him whatever it is that's on our hearts and in our lives.
So you talked about the period of time when you were writing the original version of A Heart Exposed, and I've never wrote a serial killer novel. Robert, I don't know about you. I don't watch a lot of movies like that because it makes me feel feelings that I don't necessarily like to feel. And so I can only imagine that when you're immersing yourself in that for days after days after days, hours upon hours every day, that it can take an emotional toll on you as you're writing that. So was this book of prayers kind of a respite for you in that season of life? Was it almost, I want to say, kind of like therapy for you in that time?
Yeah, in a sense, it was like, just so that people understand, like, I don't write books that glamorize evil or make it look attractive or anything along those lines. Like, there's this, I think it's Proverbs 17, and maybe I'm not getting the exact wording right, but it says, I think Proverbs 17:15, it says, those who justify the wicked and those who condemn the righteous are an abomination to the Lord. I read that once and I was like, I don't want that. Like, I don't want to justify anything that's wicked. So, like, my books, basically, they try to portray the world as it is, fractured and broken and pain, but also that hope is available, that redemption's available, that that we can, climb out of some of these difficult and dark places. So yeah, it isn't like I'm ever holding up, evil thoughts or anything as something we would want to emulate. But like you mentioned, like, I do try to be honest, and to be honest about the broken world, it's like you have to look at, the pain within it and stuff like that. And so yeah, the books that I've written, the Night, as well as others, there's specifically another one came to mind is called Opening Moves. Both are a bit dark and getting into the mindset of, a character that thinks and does things that I would never want to think and do. To get in that mindset and basically for months on end say, okay, how is this character going to respond? It did wear me out, honestly. And it was emotionally draining for me. And so I don't know if it was therapy, but it certainly was helpful to work on a book where I could just like lay out all my questions and everything to God. And the other thing is, like, in A Heart Exposed, it isn't just painful questions and difficult things and so on. It's also celebrations in ways that I don't typically take the time to do. Like, sometimes we'll just say, God, you're great, or whatever. But it's like trying to come up with a new words, new phrases, new language to be able to reflect what we feel about God to him, instead of just the same old thing every day after day, the same wording and so on.
Stephen, this is not something that I intended to ask you. And so if this comes a little bit off, and we'll get into the actual book and the specifics of the book and the details of the book here in a little bit. But as I was reading through this over the last couple of days, one of the things that really struck me is the first line of your prayers. That probably, I would say 95, 98% of them start off like a letter, so that you start with a title of God. But there are a few, and I only saw about 4 or 5 that I went through, that you skip the introduction, you skip the formalities, and you just dive right in. Is there anything behind that, or am I reading too much into that?
No, it's interesting you bring that up, because a lot of times our prayers tend to say, Father God, I'll do this, or I love you, or Jesus, or all that's fine. Like, I don't have any problem. But like, if every prayer we pray starts the same way, I was like, if you look in Scripture, there are tons of different ways that Jesus refers to himself, that God is referred to as, the Holy One, the Lord of the angel armies, or, Jesus is like the shepherd. And so it's like, when I do this, I actually want to do the same thing Scripture does. And it's like write the prayer, say the prayer to some of these other names of God that are all in Scripture, but that we tend to overlook or skip over or just don't really use that much. It's pretty powerful for me to sort of, to address God, not just as like God when I pray, but like to the creator of all that matters or something like that, where I'm like, wow. It's like, to me, it actually helps me to get into a different mindset for the prayer.
I wanted to, if I had had more time before we did this episode, I would have loved to have gone through and see if you repeated any of them, because it really was beautiful. And I was thinking this would make a great T-shirt, to have all the names here. You've seen the ones of all the names of God, before.
Oh, yeah,
but
wow.
just looking at this right here, you've got on a couple of pages here, "O God of outcasts, liars, and thieves." And the next one, "Clother of naked souls." Then the next one, "O wind of truth." Next, "Mighty deliverer." Then, "To the Holy One, to the source of joy, disturber of sleep, to the one who brings sight to the blind, to the invisible one, to the one who brings meaning to everything." And then the next one, you turn the page and it starts just, "Faith spoke to me."
He's got one that he says, "Oh, ruthlessly gracious one."
It's helpful for me
crazy.
to really do that, to try to, look deeply in Scripture, to pull out some of the ways that Scripture refers to God and so on. And then to try, I don't know if this will make any sense to y'all, but years ago and Tony, you'll probably laugh when I tell you this. I don't think I ever told you this before, but I was studying mime for a while. Mm-hmm. And so I went up to this place in South Paris, Maine, to study mime. This is in 96 or 7, probably before we even met. Anyway, so I can tell people that I studied mime in Paris, even though it was South Paris, Maine. But so I went up there, and there was this guy, Tony Montanaro, who was one of the world's premier, I guess you'd say, teachers of physical comedy, mime, and so on. And so he would say to us, "Okay, I want you to walk across the stage." So people would walk across the stage, and then he would say, "Now I want you to walk across the stage as a little child or as a monkey or as an old man," or whatever he would come up with. And so then we would walk across the stage and trying to encapsulate some of these other things that he'd mentioned. And I remember one day I was walking across the stage, and he got mad at me. He's like, "Steve." I'm like, "What?" He's like, you're like a 2-year-old. You just keep repeating the same words over and over. You need to expand your vocabulary." He was talking about my movement vocabulary, not my spoken vocabulary. But he was identifying the fact that I don't really have a very big movement vocabulary. I'd never studied mime before or physical comedy or any of those things. And so whenever I would cross the stage as a monkey or little boy or old man, whatever it is, I kind of looked the same. I was pretty much the same. Because I only had this limited, really language. The words, the movement words, they're very limited. I was like a 2-year-old. So he was saying, "Steve, you need to expand your vocabulary." And that's what I found I needed to do with The Heart Exposed, is I needed to expand my prayer vocabulary from just a few words that I typically use all the time to try and say, okay, what is a broader vocabulary that I can use to actually connect with God, in fresh, different ways, or just in deeper ways than I had before.
I think it's an interesting thing the way you're putting that, because sometimes for me, prayer starts to feel maybe it is like kind of some, at least close to the words you're using. It just feels a little off or a little stale. And I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind because I've gotten into a rut or a rhythm. And the other day I was talking with somebody and they were asking some of these questions and they were just like, I don't know how to kind of reinvigorate or to get my prayer life moving. And I was like, man, I was going to be honest. Sometimes when I'm in that space, I just open up a Psalm and they're like, which one? And I said, the first one, and then the second one, and then the third one. And I'm like, I read one a day. Maybe I read it twice. I don't have any expectations other than that I feel like that the scriptures say that God will meet us there in the moment that we are sitting with him. And so I love how you're approaching that, because, and Tony asked a couple of them, just some of the things as you were talking, I'm going, man, sitting in that deep, dark space, because like I was binge watching Criminal Minds, and I said this, I said this to Tony before, like I had to quit, like, because I found myself just getting really like distrusting of people, and I was in this space of going, why am I just always like on edge? And I was I'm watching 8-9 episodes a week, 10 episodes a week of this show that is designed to put people on edge. And so it really must have been something that was unique to be writing books that have a little bit of a darker theme and a hard, I think, redemptively, you move to a, like you said, the hero gets there in the end, but there's still some hard things to get there. But I think that's interesting when you talk through that, and then you talk about this book and just this, kind of moments of, sometimes it's, oh gracious Father, and sometimes it's like, faith's hard to come by today. And, it's just this kind of abrupt entrance sometimes, but that's really where I think God wants us to be in those moments. Just kind of pray what you got.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I like that. And I was thinking of, at one point I was thinking of trying to write a book.
You should give it a shot. You seem to have a little bit of a knack for it.
I think you could be successful with that.
It might work for you, man. You should go for it.
Like a book about like praying like Jesus. I thought that would be interesting to do a book like praying like Jesus. And then I was doing research at the time, and Jesus sometimes would pray by himself. Sometimes he would just be talking to the crowd and then suddenly just talk to God in the middle of a sentence. He would just like interrupt himself and talk to God. So he would do it by himself. He would do it in groups. He would do it inside, outside. And he would talk to God as, and just intimately. And like his friends came up to him one day and like, man, teach us to pray like you. Teach us to do that. Whatever it is you're doing, we just want to do that. And so then he teaches what we often today call the Lord's Prayer. And he always invites people to relate to God as, a loving father, and not, in a far and distant sort of, different realm wherever God isn't listening, but he always is. And so to me, I thought that was fascinating, that to Jesus, it was just like breathing. It's just like, I'll breathe right here and I'll pray in the dark by myself, or I'll pray with my friends or whatever. And it was never for show. It was always just to connect with God. And he actually, I think you guys will probably know better than I do, but like, I think that his friends said like, oh, John's disciples, he taught them to pray. Why don't you teach us to pray? Yeah. And so it's pretty fascinating that prayer, we kind of, like, I think you mentioned, kind of get in a rut sometimes. And so I don't want to be necessarily in a rut. I want to actually try to expand my vocabulary, talk to God about different things in different ways. And I find that when I do that, it kind of gets me out of the comfort zone, and kind of more, usually ends up being more intimate.
I love in the Luke telling of that, where you're talking about like I said, we call it the Lord's Prayer. Some people call it the model prayer. And right before he gives that, he goes through the whole thing about the guy who runs to his neighbor's house late at night to get bread because a guest showed up. And he's like, because of your shameless audacity. And I just think sometimes we go to God so timidly, and we're nervous because it's like, I don't know if you know this struggle I'm in. I don't know if you know that my heart's kind of in a bad space. And I think that's what's so special about the book and what you put together is there's some real moments of hope, and there's some real moments of raw. I like, there's this one quote, and I literally wish that I could have remembered this today. This week when I was talking with one of my kids, and then, it's easy now, but, I'm slowly learning that mercy is the most painful gift to receive. And I literally was having that conversation with one of my kids this week. And And it's just so complicated. And so something like that, to be able to just say that, feels odd for us. But I think that's kind of the beauty of the book and what you did.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick word from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back as we dive into some more of the idea of writing with vulnerability.
Empowering leaders, enriching lives. That's the heart of Hire Ministry. They're dedicated to equipping Christian leaders with the tools and resources they need to thrive in their calling. Whether you're looking for leadership development, strategic planning, or community outreach strategies, Hire Ministries is here to help. Visit hireministries.com to learn more and thank them for sponsoring our podcast.
All right. So, Stephen, I want to ask you a question. You create characters, you write stories, is how you've made your living, and it's the thumbprint that you've left on this world for the last couple of decades. If your story, not a story that you've written, but if your story were a book, were a novel, what's the scene that would make everyone cry?
Well, if my story was a novel, it makes me actually think to, okay, when I was a baby, and I don't even know if, I think you might know the story, Tony, but I'm not sure if you do, but whenever I was like a very small baby, I was toddling around the kitchen, and I found this cord hanging down. I pulled the cord. I was 11 months old, and my mom was cooking French fries at the time, and 2 gallons of boiling grease tipped off from the counter onto my head and my chest and my arm, and I spent a month in the hospital in like an oxygen tent, and I got pneumonia and chickenpox. Anyway, almost died from all of these severe burns that I had in my neck and my chest and so on. And so all that to say, when I was growing up as a kid, I had all these scars, right? If I would have my shirt off, and if I had class, or my arm has scars and so on. So kids would always endlessly be coming up to me like, how'd you get your scars? And I would, tell them, well, I almost got boiled alive when I was a baby. I was like, and so I would always ask myself, like, why did that happen to me? Like, why did God let that happen? And I remember when I was maybe 19 or so, I was working at this camp, and I at that point, it was like, it didn't bother me anymore. The scars were just like part of who I was. It's just the shape of my skin. Who cares? But there was this boy who came to camp, maybe 8 or 9-year-old boy named Alex. And he had long hair, long pants, even though it was summer, and long sleeve shirt. So I had a t-shirt on or whatever. And one day he came over to me and he goes, Mr. Steve, how'd you get your scars? And usually I would, at this point, make up stories to tell people, like, it was when the aliens abducted me and did strange experiments on my body. It was a shark attack or knife fight or motorcycle accident, whatever. I would just make up stuff. But this day, for whatever reason, I was like, well, I was like, when I was 11 months old, my mom was cooking French fries, and this, and the hot grease fell, and burned my arm and so on. And this boy, Alex, looks up at me, flips his head back so I can see his forehead, the scar on his forehead. And he rolls up his sleeve so I can see the scar on his arm and then on his leg. And he goes, when I was 8 months old, my sister was cooking French fries. And I was like, hey, buddy, it doesn't really change who you are. It's just, the shape of your skin, really. And it's like, and he could see at that point it didn't bother me. And later in the week, I saw him running down to go swimming with his hair blowing back in the breeze, wearing shorts for the first time. And I remember thinking, like, I don't know why God let that happen to me, but I do know that God was able to use that story to actually help this boy deal with his own scars. And so, like, if people would be brought to tears, maybe they would be brought to tears next to me as I saw that a story of pain from my life was able to help heal a similar scar in this little boy's life 18 years after I started asking the question.
Yeah, that's the one. That would be the one.
I'm handing Robert the Kleenex right now.
I might need them. That's the story. Oh my goodness.
Steve, as a professional storyteller, how do you see storytelling and prayer overlapping?
Well, one of the things that it brings to mind is the idea of imagination. And the thing is, like, in Scripture, we're asked to fix our eyes on what is unseen, to know a love that surpasses knowledge, to base our hope on the certainty of what we cannot prove. And it's just like, well, how does that work? Like, how do you do those things without imagination? Francis Schaeffer was the one who said the Christian is the one whose imagination should soar above the stars. And I think of how Jesus taught people. It was through stories. Obviously, you and I are, well, all three of us are storytellers, really. I mean, we try to take truths and shape them around stories or shape stories around them. And, a lot of times in our churches, we tend to do well at informing people. Like, we give them a lot of information, maybe a 3-point sermon that all the points start with the letter D or P or whatever it is, or there's an acronym or whatever, acrostic or something. But anyway, so we do a good job of like informing people, but that's really not, I don't think, how you fall in love with someone. Like, you could read someone's resume and you'll know information about them, but you're probably not going to fall in love by reading the resume. And so when people come to our churches, sometimes we hand them like a doctrinal statement. Here's what we believe about God, which is okay. It's fine. I mean, because it helps give people information, but that's not going to help them fall in love with God. And so, like, in my view, you fall in love with someone by spending time together, by hearing their stories, by hearing how they hurt, where they hurt, what's important to them, what matters, what makes them weep or pound the table, what do they care about, what are they passionate about. And when you know those things about someone, when you know those stories, then you start to build a relationship. And so, like, when I became a believer, I'd gone to church my whole life up until whenever I was 20 or 21. And I knew a lot of stuff about God, but to me, it wasn't like really real. It was more just information that I had consumed. I knew his resume, but then when I met Jesus, he became my brother. There's a big difference between those two things, having a relationship, being someone's brother and reading the resume. And so to me, they overlap in prayer and story overlap in the realm of imagination, where we are asked to believe and to trust in maybe what we can't necessarily see with our eyes, but hopefully we can see, with our hearts, and looking at them in a new way.
What is your hope that people will feel, get as they read through A Heart Exposed?
I just hope people will, feel real with God. Basically be real with someone. It's very easy in our culture to do what some people have called image maintenance, right? So it's like where you post, when you post, online, here and there. You try to make sure that people think a certain thing about you. Pascal wrote many years ago, he's like, we all long to live imaginary lives in the minds of others. And it's like, we kind of want people to think about us. We want to live imaginary lives in their minds. So we insert ourselves into their minds through social media or whatever it is, and try to get people to think about us and maintain whatever it is that we want people, this persona, I would say. Well, prayer to me is all about getting rid of all that stuff. There's no pretense. There's no hiding. There's no pretending. There's no masks. It's like, here's who I am, and here's what I believe, and here's where I hurt, and here's what I hope for. And then when we can bring that to God, I feel like if people can learn to at least take a step in that direction by reading the book, then that'd be amazing. I'd love to hear from them, and I'd love to be a part of that aspect of them coming closer to who God is.
We've all had moments as public speakers. The three of us all have spent a great deal of time on stages or behind podiums speaking, and we've all experienced the time where you say something that you didn't have planned. It wasn't in your notes. And as you're saying it, as you're coming out of your mouth, you're thinking, wow, where did that just come from? I'd never thought that before. I'd never said that before. Where did that come? That was really brilliant. I loved that thought. And then you realize, as believers, the three of us being believers, we realize that's the Holy Spirit working through us, and imparting wisdom upon us in that moment that was needed, maybe for us, maybe for someone else that's listening. But I'm wondering, were there any of the prayers that you wrote, or maybe lines that you wrote, that surprised you as you were writing them, that you weren't expecting God to reveal something to you in that moment that he did?
Honestly, there were so many times when I was working on the book, either writing or revising or something, where I was shocked by what I saw, because I was like, it just doesn't seem like I made that up. But I'm not trying to say that God gave me this in some sort of, I don't know, otherworldly sense or whatever. But I do believe in what you said, that God's Spirit does speak to us and through us and touch us. And so if there's anything, really worthy in the book, I'm not going to take credit for it. The Bible says every good and perfect gift comes from above. So if there's anything good in the book, I know where it came from. It didn't come from me. But I found myself a lot of times being kind of surprised when I would look at a prayer and be like, I never thought of that before. And so there was a lot for me, just personally, a big journey of introspection and understanding as I was working on the book. One thing sometimes people talk to me is like, well, what about like just extemporaneous prayers, just making up a prayer on the spot? And I'm like, that's fantastic. I have nothing against that. I just feel like sometimes it's okay to write out your prayers and to work on them. And like most of the worship songs that we have are basically prayers. Like they're prayers that a musician worked really hard on getting the words right and the music right. And all of the Psalms, are prayers. And it's like, if they hadn't been written down, we wouldn't have the greatest songbook of, and poems, the Psalms that exist in the world. And we wouldn't have so many of the wonderful hymns and songs and spiritual songs and so on that we have. These people wrote them down for us. So I think it's fantastic to do both. Like, certainly, just take whatever it is on your heart to God and talk to him. But sometimes it's okay, I think, too, to just use written prayers and use that as part of your, quiet time or daily worship or whatever it is you call it.
You said in the introduction that some of these prayers were etched out of the granite of suffering. I loved that line. And I'm just wondering, would you read us one of the prayers from the book and just kind of walk us through what your process was like as you were writing that prayer?
Yes, I will. As soon as I jump up and run over to my shelf and snatch up the book. I know you're going to be patient as I do that, because when I was just looking around, I was like, it's actually now within reach. So just give me one sec, buddy.
And while you're doing that, we'll have another word from Higher Ministries.
Is your ministry ready to reach new heights? Higher Ministries is here to help you grow, lead, and serve with excellence. From leadership coaching to practical resources for church management, they offer everything you need to take your ministry to the next level. We're proud to have them as our sponsor. Visit higherministries.com today and see how they can help you make a greater impact.
Yeah, I left my copy at home as well. Mine's a little further reach than his is. But,
you need a longer commercial break for that one.
We need about an hour commercial break for me to get there and back this time of day anyway.
There was one prayer that it just kind of came to mind that I'll just kind of read through and I'll try to talk through kind of what was going on in my mind. But okay, so this is one prayer, and it goes like this. It says, "Oh, elegant mystery." And okay, so this is the first line. Like, I've never heard a lot of times where we actually refer to God as basically a mystery or the mystery, but I know that God's someone I don't understand. I can't really comprehend him, and things I can't comprehend are mysteries to me. Paul talks about like, who are we to think we can understand, God? So anyway, this is what I wrote. It says, "Oh, elegant mystery, creator of time, revealer of history, tune of the chime." And when I wrote, I was just thinking of like how God brings music to our hearts, and literally, so when it says, obviously, tune of the chime is just like God's bringing music to me, to deep inside of me. So, creator of time, revealer of history, tune of the chime, echo and swirl and curl through my mind. Here I am waiting to be found and to find. So, like, this is one of the unusual prayers in the book that actually rhymes. It's like most of them don't rhyme for whatever reason, but this one just popped in my mind. But I like how it says, here I am waiting to be found and to find. Like, Jesus said that he came to seek and to save that which was lost. And of course, one of my favorite stories, and I know you guys are super familiar with, in Luke 15, what we usually call the prodigal son. And it's like how he was both, how the father said he was lost, but he's found, again. And it's like, I kind of live my life both lost and found sometimes in the same breath. It's so weird. It's like we find ourselves slipping, but also regrouping and coming back. So that's why it says, here I am waiting to be found and to find. It's like God finds us and then we find him. So it's a seeker of shepherd, blossom of laws. And I just like the idea of how Jesus came to basically fulfill the laws, not to get rid of or diminish or wipe out the laws. So when I think of a law being fulfilled, I think of it blossoming like a flower or something like that. So it's like seeker of shepherd, blossom of laws, lion of conquest, sharpen your claws. Here I am waiting, a child of your light. No more debating with my soul in the night. Circle and stir and renew my soul. Oh, elegant mystery, splinter me whole. So like when I talk about splintering me whole, it's like break me apart in the way that you need to bring me closer and draw me closer to you. So obviously, like I said, most of the prayers don't rhyme, but this one to me just has a lot of imagery that's significant to me about being lost and found and splintered and made whole. And how God is a mystery beyond knowing, but that he draws us closer to him. As we draw our, close to him, he draws close to us.
Stephen, when I was 15 years old, I had a youth leader of ours at our church. Wasn't anyone on staff. It was just a volunteer who, for my birthday, gave me a book. And it was, from the moment he handed it to me, it was striking. It was small. It was leather bound. The pages in it were almost like a papyrus page. They were an off-white, had burns to them, and they were frayed on all of the edges. And it was a copy of Oswald Chambers' My Utmost for His Highest.
Oh, yeah.
And I cherished that book forever for the words that were in it, but even for the detail and the beauty that were in the cover and the pages and the little pieces of art that adorned some of the chapter beginnings or day beginnings. When I received A Heart Exposed, I was stricken by the book, that it looks different than a lot of books. And then you open it up and you enlisted the help of Joe Castillo to draw some original art for it. How much thought went into the actual physical book and what it would look like and what it would feel like in someone's hands, not just what the experience would be like for them reading it, but the visual experience as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I did want to mention that Joe Castillo is a good friend of mine. He's a world-renowned artist, and he's actually traveled all over the world for the last 30 years and doing art. And he's also a pastor. He's pastored churches and so on. But when I reached out to Joe, I was like, look, we're doing this book of prayers. Would you be interested to do a few, original pieces of artwork for it? And he was so kind to do so. And they're just amazing pieces of art that go with some of the prayers in the book. And The hardback version is in color. Like there's like some of the prayers are in a different color, and I wanted it to be something where you could sort of, hang on to it, not just sort of grab it and read it and toss it away or whatever. So yeah, we did think quite a bit about that, but there's also a version, like there is an e-version, and there is a soft cover version as well. But really the one that we spent the most time trying to create more of a keepsake is the hardback version of A Heart Exposed.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this right now and you haven't already gone and bought the book, it's worth the extra dollars to get the hardback cover, something that I think that you will go to again and again, and will be one of those books that doesn't keep the binding stiff, because you'll go to it over and over again throughout the years. But this isn't the only one. Stephen, this is the first of a trilogy, right?
Yeah, we're actually trying to do, 2 more collections of prayers. So like I mentioned earlier, 15 years ago, it's when A Heart Exposed came out. And so since then, over the last 15 years, I've been dabbling with new prayers, new ideas. And so I reached out to my publisher and he said, yeah, let's actually do a couple more volumes. So A Soul Set Free should be releasing later this year. And then A Hope Reborn will come after that. And so, so hopefully people, if they enjoy the types of prayers and so on in A Heart Exposed, that there will be, some additional ones that hopefully they can connect with down the line.
I love it. The prayers in this book, they're honest, they're raw, they're vulnerable. What would you say to someone who's afraid to be this honest with God?
I would say that God already knows your heart. Like he already knows what's going on deep underneath the surface. When we look at people, when I look at someone, I only see the surface, obviously. It's like looking at the surface of the ocean. And I remember years ago, my wife and I went to Hawaii, and we were going to go kind of snorkeling in this one area. And so you looked at the top of the surface, and it was really calm. But once you dove in, it's like underneath the surface, there were all these currents that some would take you deeper, into the ocean. Some would smash you into rocks if you weren't careful. And I remember thinking, it's like so many people, when we look at their surface, we just see it smooth. But deep underneath it, and man, there's a lot of currents going back and forth. Some currents that even they're not really aware of, but every time you meet someone, it's like there's deep currents there. And God already knows. He's gone as deep as he can go into our hearts, and he knows our souls. And so sometimes prayer isn't so much about us revealing something to God as when we pray, it's almost like he reveals actually something more to us. And so I really would just, encourage people to don't hide whatever it is, whether it's celebration and joy or heartache and grief or whatever it is. It's interesting. Jesus, was obviously fully a human being. So that means that, but he was also perfect. So it means that he experienced every emotion that we experience to the most possible degree, like the most possible joy. Like whenever in, John 15, he says, my joy will be in you and your joy will be complete. Like, can you imagine having complete joy? And also he's talked about in scripture as a man of sorrows. Well, how is he both? He's both, he's all, like both of them. And so like he's experienced anything that you've experienced. Jesus has gone through, similar depths of emotion. And, he just wants to walk with you through the journey, the next part of your life.
Robert sent me a list yesterday of questions that we were looking at, not for you specifically, Stephen, but really for any guest that we have. And one of those really struck me as we were preparing for this conversation. And so I want to ask you this question. I also want to ask Robert this question, and in it, asking myself this question as it focuses around prayer. That do you pray because you believe, or do you pray because you're afraid not to?
Okay. Do I pray because I believe or because I'm afraid? Now, I don't know that it's fear for me, It's more of a deep need, like,
That's
I
a good
guess,
answer.
yeah, like for me, it's just, I don't always pray and I don't always pray like I should, but I know that God's available. He's always listening. And no matter what I'm going through, he'll, he'll take the time, like, to be with me. He'll take the time. Um, you know, the guy, remember, earlier, Tony, you asked me about stories and storytelling. And I think of my uncle as the person who told me stories when I was a little kid. Like, he told us all these imaginative stories. And as I got older, he would just hang out and just listen to whatever was going on in my life, like the stories and stuff. And I remember saying to him one time, I was like, Uncle Rich, it seems like when I'm with you and I'm talking with you, there's nothing in the world you'd rather be doing than just listening to what I have to say. And he goes, there isn't anything. And that's what God is like. He's like, there's nothing he'd rather be doing than listening to what we have to say. And he's not like just listening, thinking, oh, I'm on my way out the door. I'll be back in a minute. But a little glimpse of the compassion of my uncle helps me to understand a little bit more about the availability of God.
Yeah, I think if I'm honest, there are a lot of times that my prayers are because I'm afraid not to pray. But is it because I want to spend the time in prayer, or is it because I'm afraid not to pray for them?
I think if I was answering that part of it, I would say I pray because it's the only hope there is. And so in that, it's not so much that maybe I'm not it's not that I'm afraid not to pray. It's that I know there's not any other source that I can go to that can sustain, fix, heal, help, work in that moment. And so I may not always come at it from the perfect heart. And I think that's the beauty of sanctification. But
You don't know.
15 years since you originally wrote A Heart Exposed. There's a reason that 15 years later you came back, revisited this. There had to have been people over the last decade and a half that have said, hey, we're trying to get this book to send as a gift, and you've had to say it's out of print, it's no longer around anymore. How have you seen the words that you wrote, the prayers that you wrote a decade and a half ago, become a companion for people in life? What are some stories that you've heard that caused you, that there had to be a reason that you said this book needs to be reintroduced again?
Well, I've heard from a lot of people who have found the prayers just helpful in their journey, as they walk along. And so I know that for me personally, I was just, as you all were talking about, your kids and praying for your kids. And I actually know why you pray for your kids, because neither of one of you guys are the best driver. No, I'm kidding. But I was just like, paging through, kind of re-looking at some of the prayers in the book. And I was like, I'm just thankful that, and humbled by the fact that people were able to use some of these scribblings that I've had over the last few decades, and that, maybe it's a way to help them connect closer with God. And I guess there's no other greater honor than just to be a part of that in people's lives.
Yeah, you actually say in the prayer on page 190, we need saving from selfishness, from spiritual blindness, and from road rage. So I think that the one with the driving issue is probably you.
It's probably, yeah. No, that might be me.
if he's heard my sermons, he knows he is not the only one that shares in that space. I'm probably a little aggravated with a couple of locations in our area.
How do you think that church leaders, small group leaders, pastors can model or encourage this kind of honest, raw, vulnerable prayer?
I mean, some of the prayers are actually available. People can use them in worship services. There's little music videos that they've done of some of the prayers. And I believe if you go to a Heart Exposed, I think it's a heartexposed.com, you can get those for free and use them at your church. And so that, I mean, that's an easy, resource that's available for, for pastors. And the other thing is I would suggest, use any of the prayers in the book and put them in your church folder, bulletin, put them up on the screen as people come in. You have total permission to use it for anything like that. There's no copyright worries. Just use it to minister to people. And you have totally my permission to use it in any way that you could actually help encourage people. So get them out there and share them however you want to in your newsletters, on your website, blogs, whatever. And hopefully encourage people in their journeys.
That's incredibly gracious. And so hopefully everyone will take advantage of that. All right, we're going to shift gears a little bit, something a little bit more off the cuff. And so we are going to spend a few minutes hear from the one and only Stephen James on what are the things that he's enjoying in life right now. It is time for Porch Picks.
All right, folks, pull up a rocking chair and grab yourself a glass of sweet tea. It's time for Porch Picks. This is where we give you our top recommendations on, well, just about anything. If we like it, we're picking it. No deep theology here, just good old-fashioned opinions. So sit back, relax, and get ready for this week's Porch Picks.
Is there a movie you've seen recently? Is there a TV show that you're into, a book that you've read, a podcast that you're listening to, maybe a new cereal that you just discovered or a new restaurant that you would recommend? If you like it, you can pick it.
I've actually been reading this book by Peter. I think it's Kreeft. I don't know if it's Kreft, but he's a Christian philosopher, but it's actually really interesting. It's called If Einstein Were a Surfer. And such an interesting book, but he's talking about I don't know how to say, things on the almost quantum level and just exploring that from a philosophical perspective. And it sounds crazy when I say it, but he makes it super interesting and fun. So I've been actually reading that book about Einstein. If you search for Einstein Surfer, I'm sure it'll come up. But,
all right, Einstein Surfer.
Yeah, no, that was pretty interesting. If Einstein Were a Surfer is, I think, the title of it. And then what are you guys watching these days on TV? I'm curious.
Go for it.
You just came off the 40-day television fast.
Yeah.
So you could bring some insights into this, that now that you have finished that fast, and we spent a whole episode talking about this last week, but what are you watching right now, Robert Kell?
One of my kids wanted to watch the Now You See Me movies.
Love those movies. We had a guest the other day tell us that a new one's coming out.
Yeah. The third one's coming out in November, and so he was like, "Hey, let's watch these." And so we've watched those over the last week or so. I love the TV show Leverage, and I don't necessarily love Leverage 2.0 on Amazon, but it's one of my kids likes that, and we watched a little bit, and then catching up on Reacher. I've still not finished it. Couple things like that, The Rookie, and a couple shows there, but haven't re-engaged everything I've watched, but watched a couple of ditties there. Reading Mark Batterson's book, Not Safe. We're doing a sermon series on that. And it's a really, really good challenge, good book. I like Mark. And I don't know him personally. I like his books though. And we had an apple, what was it? A fried apple pie at Cheddar's the other night. That was not terrible.
All right.
So it was pretty good. Comes with ice cream, a little caramel.
I could get into that.
It wasn't bad at all.
Yeah, my picks for this week, I'm going the food route too. That I tend to try to eat fairly healthy.
You do pretty well.
And we've talked a little bit about that. And
of the hosts of this podcast, you are by far the healthiest.
Yeah. Yeah. But so I look for new things that can be treats, but at the same time fall in line with my practices and thoughts on what I put into my body. And we have been introduced recently to True Fruit. Are you familiar with True Fruit?
I'm assuming it has some type of tofu thing.
No, not at all. It is True Fruit. And so they take, like, our favorite is the strawberries. And you can get these in any of your local grocery stores. They have all different varieties and kinds, but our favorite is the strawberries. That they have strawberries that are dipped in white chocolate, then dark chocolate, and frozen. And you buy them frozen and you eat them frozen. And man, you can put away a bag of those. They're so good. And then the other thing that I discovered lately is I don't drink soft drinks. I don't drink anything but just water for the most part. I don't drink juices, too much sugar in juices. But I love Hint. There's always a Hint sitting here on the desk while we're recording. The other day, we're perusing through the aisles of Sam's Club, and they have on sale buy coconut water. Now this is not like purchase coconut water. It was buy, it's the brand BAI coconut water. And they've got just regular coconut water. They've got strawberry coconut water, and they've got pineapple coconut water. Let me tell you, this is my new obsession. I have one a day after dinner. It's like my dessert. It's like an after dinner dessert. It's like drinking a virgin pina colada that only has 10 calories in the entire bottle. It is a treat every time that you pop the lid. So I am very excited about Buy and about True Fruit, and those are my porch picks for the week.
Cool. Well, I have to do one more then, because I was just thinking of shows. Now, I don't know if everyone loves it. It has some moments that are a little objectionable and so on, but I actually am a big fan of this show called Black Mirror on Netflix. And I really love how they explore kind of the perhaps dark side of technology in the near future. And so if you like science fiction, and some of it, I'm not saying 100% of it is always uplifting and stuff, but the storytelling is super good. So I'm actually a fan of that show Black Mirror, and they just had a new season come out on Netflix.
All right. So, Stephen, what do you hope that listeners and readers will take away from Heart Exposed?
Man, just even if it encourages you at all in your walk with God, if it gives you a little bit of new vocabulary, so that you're not like me, like a 2-year-old stumbling around on stage, and you actually have sort of being equipped, hopefully, with some new vocabulary to relate to God, and that would just be amazing to be a part of that journey for people.
Can you give us the rundown really quick of where people can find this book? Where can they purchase it? Where can they buy it? Where can they find out more about you and your writings, your other projects that you have going on? You are also a great podcaster with your Story Blender. Where can our listeners find that to tune in? You have any great guests coming up on that? Give us the whole spiel of where people listening to the Pulpit and Porch right now can find more, get more, and get their fill of Stephen James.
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, The Heart Exposed is available on Amazon, other places too, but I do know that for sure that it's available in the hardback version on Amazon. So whatever your feelings about Amazon, positive or negative, it's a place to check out this book, and you can probably order it wherever you order your books. It's probably available in a different format there. As far as connecting with me, just feel free to check out stephenjames.net. And the podcast, The Story Blender, is at thestoryblender.com. I'm always glad to hear from people on social media at Read Stephen James, and look forward to hopefully connecting with some of your, your listeners, and just appreciate the chance to be here today.
I'm behind a couple of episodes, but that's a great podcast. And so you're doing a good job with that there. It's really good. It's really good guests. I was telling somebody about it today. And so really good guests. And
yeah, you had one guy on it like 2 or 3 times that was phenomenal.
I wonder who that could possibly be. If his first name starts with Tony
and ends with, that's the episode I skipped. I mean, that Tony.
It is, though. If you're looking for a great listen, the Story Blender podcast is phenomenal, and he has some amazing guests on there, and Stephen does a great job of navigating through that show and pulling the best out of the guests that he gets on. So definitely recommend that all of our listeners check that out as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate being here. It's good to be on the porch, and I'll have to try some Bai coconut water while I check out some of those shows that Robert mentioned a minute ago.
Hey, well, thanks so much, Stephen, for being here. It is always a privilege to have you on the porch. Thanks for listening today. Thanks for our sponsor, Higher Ministries. You can check them out at higherministries.com. Stay in touch. Check us out on social media, Pulpit and Porch. You can search us up there on Facebook, Instagram. You will see some other sources coming soon, so keep some eyes and ears out for that. And with that said, reach out, holler at us, let us know what you think, ask some questions, and we can't wait to see you next time on the porch.
We are out.